Yeah. It's a beautiful day, my friend. How you do today, good web soul? Thank you very much for clicking this video. That gesture, my friend, is not taken for granted and has been received with lots of gratitude from this side of the world. I am Y311H. Together with my bunny friends here, my friend, we shall be reacting together to extremely good vibes videos that I would like you to join me, my friend, because we will get to see how different humans live and think from different places of the world. And all this, my friend, is with the pure intentions of spreading honesty, forgiveness, peace, and love to the whole world. And my friend, we always read from the book of wisdom also, so we might gain something new every day as you go on. My friend, pass me that book kindly. And today being a good vibes day full of God's grace, let's read this and hear what it says. I will praise you, O Lord, with all my heart. I will tell of all your wonders. I will be glad and rejoice in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High. Psalm 9, 1 and 2. Wonderful word, my friend. God is always great. And let's give thanks to our Creator. Dear Lord Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the videos we have today. Thank you for the fruits, Father, the animals, and this wonderful soul that have joined us. All glory and honor belong unto you, Father. Dear Lord, as we react together to these videos, guide us through, fill us with your spirit, and help us, dear Lord, to speak about love all through. In Jesus' mighty name, we do pray, trusting and believing. Amen. Let's dive in good vibes.
Capitalism is slavery with extra steps, or capitalism is feudalism with extra steps. You may have heard somebody make that claim before, but what exactly are those extra steps? Let me show you. And before I start, I just want to mention that I am in no way trying to trivialize or minimize the horrors that happened under traditional forms of slavery like chattel slavery. And if you have any issues with my video and how I presented it, just kindly let me know. So unfortunately, over thousands of years, across the world in many different civilizations, mankind has had many different systems of slavery, okay? So what is slavery? Slavery is the owning of another person. But why do you want to own another person? Why would somebody want to do that? They want to own the person for their labor, okay? Because you can go ahead and build wealth through your own personal labor, right? But there's only so many hours in a day. There's only so much labor you can personally do in a day. So if you can go ahead and own other people and force them to do labor as well, then because you own them, not only are you getting the value of your own labor, but you're getting the value of other people's labor, right? So we're going to work with this question here. How to extract the value of another person's labor? And under chattel slavery is you have direct ownership of another human being, right? And because you directly own that person, you can force them to work, and any work that they do, any wealth they create from that work, you just get to keep it because you directly own that person. And next up is feudalism. Now, feudalism, they didn't own the people directly like in chattel slavery, but instead they owned the land, right? That the worker worked on, right? So now they're not getting the value of their labor from forcing them to work directly, but they're saying, you're working on top of the land that I own. I own this land. And therefore, if you want to continue standing on this land, you have to give me money in return, right? So this is the extra step here. You're not directly owning the person, but you're owning the land on which they are doing the work. And then they have to give part of the value of their work to the owner of the land. Okay, so that leads us to capitalism. And under capitalism, you aren't extracting the value of somebody's labor through directly owning the person or owning the land in which they stand on. But what makes capitalism different is that you are owning the tools and the machines the worker needs to do their job, also known as the means of production. Now, capitalism is only a few hundred years old. So why was it only able to exist for that long? Why hasn't it been around for thousands of years? Because in the past, For most of human history, the tools and the machines needed for an average worker to do their job were very simplistic, right? So let's say, for example, we have these tools here. So in the past, let's say, for example, you want to make shoes for a living, but you don't have the tools to make the shoes. So you would go to someone who does have the tools and be like, hey, I would like to work for you. Right? And so let's say you now make $100 worth of shoes in 1 hour, right? So under capitalism, because they owned the tools, they're going to be like, okay, this is my $100 now. I'm going to give you a wage of $15 in return for your work. Okay. Now, when tools were very simplistic, this worker isn't going to take that deal for very long because that's a crappy deal because they're the one that's actually doing all the labor. So they're going to go ahead when the tools are simplistic, they could create their own or they can save enough money. It didn't take very long for them to buy their own tools. And then they could get rid of this guy and just work for themselves and make their own shoes. However, as technology has advanced, and especially after the Industrial Revolution, the tools that are needed are no longer so simplistic. And now we have, factories, huge factories with very complex machines inside of them, right? That took thousands upon thousands of man hours and tons of capital to go ahead and invest in and build these things. And so if we go back to the scenario now where you want to make shoes, and now you can make your own shoes, but you're not going to be able to compete because you can only make so many shoes in an hour, and somebody can make, 10, 100 times more shoes in the same amount of time with these machines. So you have to go to an owner of these machines and be like, okay, I would like to make shoes for you now. And because of the machines, now you're not making $100 worth of shoes per hour, you're making $200 worth of shoes per hour. But because you don't have ownership of these things, the owner or the capitalist is going to say, okay, I'm going to give you a wage of $15 per hour. And here is the insidious thing about capitalism, is that it gives you this illusion of choice and this illusion of freedom, because the argument is going to be, if you don't like that wage that he's offering to you, then go ahead and just find somewhere else or work for yourself. Which can some people go ahead and work for themselves? Absolutely, right? But that's not going to work for the billions of people in the world, right? And we can't have billions of individual factories with these machines, right? So the average person is going to have to go to an owner of these complex tools and machines and negotiate a wage. And one of the things that capitalists will do is make sure that all social safety nets are completely gutted to make this worker desperate. So yeah, sure, they have a choice to walk away, but when their choice is to take the $15 per hour or risk homelessness, they're going to go ahead and take the $15 per hour, even though it is a poverty wage. And I'll just end with, all socialism means is that you no longer have random private owners of these things, and society as a whole collectively owns it together, right? Because when you think about it, all of these inventions and things, no one person was able to build this or invent it or create it. All of these things are a culmination of thousands of years of human history and learning and education. And so saying that one person is entitled to the fruit of all of this collective knowledge it's not fair, and it's not sustainable. And it's not sustainable because think of the future of capitalism as technology progresses. Eventually, we're going to hit a point where all of the machines to do the job, you don't even need human labor anymore. You have machines. So what's going to happen to the masses of people who no longer have a way to make a living for themselves? And all of these machines are owned by a few private individuals.
What you're about to see is something that so few people alive have seen and heard, but that every single person should. Last year, I had the opportunity to go to Hiroshima, Japan for work. And while I was there, I had the incredible honor and privilege of being able to meet with a survivor of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. Her name is Toshiko Tanaka, and she was just 6 years old when the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. Now, my native language is Japanese. Hers, of course, is as well. So we got the opportunity to converse, just the two of us, for over an hour. And the discussion that we had is something that will never ever leave me. I think about it every day. But she also worked really hard with help to write her experience out in English and practiced delivering it so that you would be able to hear her experience as well. And she let me record that so that I would be able to share it with you. So here is Toshiko sharing her story.
Hello, my name is Toshiko Tanaka. I survived the atomic bombing in Hiroshima. I've been creating enamel mural artwork for over 50 years. It wasn't easy for me to talk about what had happened in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. I thought people would not understand me. I was traumatized and not able to talk to anybody about my personal experience of the atomic bombing, not even to my own family. I started to open up and share this horrible experience when I turned 70. I went to Venezuela on peace boat 15 years ago and met Mr. Toledo, the mayor of the city of La Guaira. He said to me, as a survivor of the atomic bombing, you have a responsibility to talk about what happened. That really touched my heart. Originally, my family lived only 500 meters from ground zero, where the bomb hit. But just 1 week before the atomic bombing, we moved 2.3 kilometers away from ground zero. Because of this, I am alive today. Even though I was burned and exposed to radiation. When I was just 6 years old, the gigantic mushroom cloud was right above me. At 8:15 a.m., I was on my way to school. Somebody shouted, B-29, the enemy bomber. I looked up and saw a tremendous flash. It was like a million lights. Everything went white. I couldn't see. I covered my face with my right arm. Heat burned my head, my neck, and my right arm. Then suddenly everything went dark, like nighttime. Hot sand dust blew up. It covered the sun. I couldn't see. My mouth was full of dust. What was happening? What should I do? I can't forget that terrible crunchy sand taste. Soon my burned arm began to swell. The pain was incredible. I cried all the way home, but our house was very damaged. When I got there, even though my mother was alive, she could not recognize me. My hair was burned. I was covered in ash. My clothes were destroyed. That night, I was close to death. Survival depended on how strong you were and how lucky. My younger sister had bad head wounds. Our roof was mostly gone. But suddenly, I looked up and saw a small patch of blue sky. Although I was in pain, I thought, this is so beautiful. That blue sky stayed with me. It had given me the will to live. And if the heavens said, don't worry, there will be a tomorrow. This is why I continue to live life positively, even through many hardships. It took only 1 second for a single bomb to destroy the city of Hiroshima and 140,000 lives. All my former classmates were killed. My young aunt left home that morning and never came back. Her body was never found. Every image of that terrible day remains. My generation will be the last to tell you about this event as direct witnesses. This is what I saw. After I got home that day, I saw a large crowd of dying people. They were walking in procession, near my house. Some were orphans. Men, women, and children alike were almost naked with burned clothes. They walked in silence with outstretched arms. Burned pale skin hung from the tips of their fingers. They were like ghosts. Even today, whenever I see barbecued tomatoes, it reminds me of that terrible scene of death. Like tomatoes, human skin peels off easily when burned. Later, something weird started to happen.
You realize you can't see through the sun. The sun is not transparent to visible light. Because visible light, when it enters the sun is made of plasma, which is gas where electrons have been ripped off. So you have free-moving electrons and atoms. The consequence of that is light interacts heavily with free electrons. You try to move light through a plasma, and the light sees an electron, it careens off of it. And it does not travel in a straight line. It bounces and careens and scatters. By the time the light comes out the other side, you lost all hope of any information about what was on the other side of the star.
These two resistors are of the exact same value, even though their color bands look very different. They're both 10 kiloohms, as I can confirm with my multimeter. What's mildly confusing is that they use different color code schemes, and it doesn't help that these blue ones are more difficult to read. Anyway, this one uses 4 bands: brown, black, orange for the multiplier, and gold for tolerance. These used to be very common, but nowadays I think I see the blue ones more often. They use 5 bands instead. Here we have brown, black, black, a red band for the multiplier, and a brown one indicating a tolerance of 1%. But given that I got these from AliExpress, I wouldn't trust that 1% rating too much.
Does the continent of Africa have the lowest IQ in the entire world? Well, I'm going to be tearing this claim apart in this video. If you've been unfortunate enough to scroll through some social media, you've probably seen something like this, where they're saying that the average African IQ in many of these countries is in the 60s or 70s. Now, these are claims that can be sourced, and your first instinct might be that the IQ tests that are administered in Africa are either unfair or culturally biased. But the reality is, they didn't administer IQ tests at all. The methodology that they used is so sloppy and cheap it belies belief. What they do is they take the profession that they record a population doing as an aggregate, and then they assign an IQ based on that. They're not actually testing it. So for instance, if they were to go to a village in Nigeria and they said that the people aren't working as accountants, they're going to lower the IQ to where they think that a population of farmers would be. Now, how do they get these numbers? They come basically out of nowhere, really from studies from the 1950s that don't really have any statistical significance. But when we actually go through these studies, what they're doing is they're just taking professions and saying, based on what we think the people are doing, this is what we think their IQ is. I mean, tell me, if you're from Africa, has anyone ever given you an IQ test or anybody that you know an IQ test? Actually, a proper IQ test takes a lot of resources. For each person, it takes over 2 to 3 hours to test them. And what's really shocking about this is that if you go off of the IQ measurements that they are reporting, so IQ in the 60s to 70s, that's generally considered a range at which people are unable or have trouble dressing or feeding themselves. So right off the bat, you know the data isn't legitimate. And the reason I want to just put this in the dirt is because we have investments in Africa and we do business in Africa. And when people slander people from Africa, that's bad for business. So not only is it factually inaccurate, it costs us money. And so when someone says to you, well, we think that the IQs are looking like this, ask them where the data comes from. You'll be surprised people will repeat things without actually knowing where the numbers came from. And to me, I think that this is part of a general propaganda campaign against Africa. Sorry to put a conspiracy theorist hat on too tightly here, but I genuinely think that's the case. I've been to the universities in Africa. I've got to know the business people on the ground in Africa. It's complete nonsense. But I want to know what you guys think. Why is it that people are so willing to look at studies that took place in the 1950s as fact? Is that a problem with Western thinking? And what can we do to overcome this? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if this video brought value to you, give me a like and a follow. That really helps out my channel. I'll see you guys on the next video.
One love, my friends. One love to all people in their uniqueness and good vibes. Now, there's this video here. Are you seeing something there? What? Whoa, my God. Could that be an alien or a ghost? Good people of Earth, what do you think that creature could have been? And when Good Vibes guy came closer to check, it's no longer there. It's like that thing just vanished. Oh my god. Now, good vibes soul. After you had seen such a thing in your backyard and it disappears mysteriously, would you go on checking for that thing or would you vacate and search for alternative means? Please leave in the comment section what you would have done in such a situation. You just see aliens in your backyard. Hey, you didn't welcome them. They didn't send even notice they were coming. Then they are near your tomatoes.
This looks like something I would use to charge my phone.
The NSA is selling these for $20,000. And I have a friend, MG, he goes by, who is selling them for, a couple $100 a piece. And I have a bunch of them I can show you. But this one I preloaded with something cool that you'll appreciate.
Okay.
So this is a charger that will work. I could hand this to you and say, hey, here's my charger, man, or replace yours, right? You bring this home, it could act like a charger forever, but as soon as this plugs in, inside of this tiny little plastic right here, inside of this is a Wi-Fi chip, a mini computer, and this thing emulates a keyboard and can type at 860 characters per second. So what I'll do is, because I'm sure you don't want me to plug this into your computer,
No,
right?
I don't.
So
back in 1973, Stanford University ran an experiment where they sent 8 mentally healthy patients to a mental hospital. All 8 patients were told to tell their doctors that they were hearing voices and seeing hallucinations. But once they got accepted into the mental hospital, they were told to act completely normal. The people in charge of this experiment did not tell the hospital or staff that they were running the experiment. After 7 days of all 8 patients being in the mental hospital, all of them were diagnosed with serious mental disorders. In fact, all 8 patients were diagnosed with either schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, even though the entire time they acted completely normal. Stanford University published their findings challenging the validity of diagnosing psychiatric disorders. When the hospital heard about this, they asked Stanford to perform the experiment one more time. They wanted to prove that they could accurately diagnose patients and tell if a patient was faking it or not. The experimenters back at Stanford told the hospital they would in fact send 8 more patients. For the next 5 weeks, the hospital really focused in on patients, trying to find the 8 patients that were quote-unquote faking it. After 5 weeks of looking for the 8 patients, the hospital called Stanford and claimed they found the 8 patients, only for Stanford to tell the hospital that they hadn't sent any 8 patients yet.
Right to the core from all the things we've done, from all the apples falling before. I sweat the earth.
If you want more iron in your diet, this fish could actually help. 1 out of 3 people watching this video probably have iron deficiency anemia. This iron fish is based off the concept that food cooked in an iron pot will absorb iron leached from the pot. Using iron cookware is a cheap and easy way to get more iron into your diet. Similarly, you can place this lucky iron fish into a pot of boiling water for 10 minutes. This reusable fish-shaped ingot releases a consistent dose of iron into the cooking water. You can even add in a few drops of lemon juice to increase the iron absorption. Subsequently, the stew, the soup, whatever food you make will absorb the iron from that iron-enriched water, thus increasing the overall iron content of the meal. One meal cooked with this lucky iron fish can substantially contribute to daily iron requirements. The iron fish is reusable and can last up to 5 years. Interestingly, trials on several hundred villagers in one province in Cambodia showed that nearly half of those who took part were no longer anemic at 12 months after using these. Of course, getting a varied diet or using iron supplements have been seen as the traditional ways of managing iron deficiency anemia, but these aren't financially feasible or accessible in all parts of the world. So it does feel lucky knowing that you could be munching on a cassoulet while fish slapping anemia with this little iron gadget.
Every single year, dozens of human feet wash up on the beaches of Washington. Typically, these feet are still wearing shoes, but not always. There really isn't much in common with all these feet. They belong to all ages, all ethnicities, male or female. But the one thing that they all have in common is they're all detached from the ankle. There's never shins, there's never kneecaps, there's never thighs, just feet. Every time a beachgoer discovers one of these feet and alerts the authorities, the police rule out foul play. So what's going on? This is America. Why do we keep having feet show up at our beaches? Well, in 2017, after 15 years of no explanation from any police, the FBI released a statement about the investigation they were doing. They called the investigation Washington's Foot Issue. Kinda odd, but I digress. The FBI told the public that every year, hundreds of unknown people get lost at sea. And when they get lost at sea, eventually they'll get eaten by the fishes. Every part of a human will get eaten by fishes if they're in the ocean long enough. Except tightly tied shoes. Fish won't eat tightly tied shoes. And so, fishes will eat every single part of the body except the feet. And rubber-soled shoes will then float. And then, these floating shoes with feet inside them will get blown onto the beaches, only to be discovered by an unsuspecting beachgoer.
This is what happens when you go to a nasty-ass barber that doesn't clean their clippers. You get ringworm all over your head.
Before you get your haircut, make sure you see your barber sanitizing the equipment that he is going to use on you. Because if you don't and you just jump in the chair and you hear the bzzz sound, you could end up like this. This is Tinea capitis. It's a fungal infection of the scalp, and because it's so widespread, treatment is complicated.